Tanya, can I ask you to please bring me some water here as well? Thanks. I don't want to. Yeah, have you asked for still? All right. So, no, no, no. Is it coming? Yeah. All right. Fine. Am I live? Yes? Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this 2021 CSTL conference, co-hosted by the Department of Basic Education, MIET Africa, UNICEF, and the National Education Collaboration Trust. Today is the third day of our deliberations, and this morning we are engaged with three of our pillars: child safety, food security, and material support. Our first speaker this morning is Patrick Burton, a renowned research consultant specializing in the prevention of violence against children and has research experience from many parts of the world. He is also the director for the Center of Justice and Crime Prevention in South Africa. This morning, Patrick is going to be speaking to us about online safety and the protection of children in the COVID-19 context, considerations for the basic education sector. Over to you, Patrick.
Thanks very much, Dr. Watson. I am just going to share my screen quickly. I hope everybody can see it. First,
we can see your slides.
Perfect. Thanks, Doctor. So first, thank you very much for the invitation to speak here. I'm honored to join you all today. And as the chair said, I'm going to be speaking about implications for the online safety of children through the COVID-19 pandemic, with particular reference to the basic education sector. So I'm going to touch in my 20 minutes on three things. First, very briefly, I'm going to speak in very qualitative terms on the impact of COVID-19 on children's experiences of online risks. I then want to explore the education system's response, but also the readiness to deal with the shift that happened through COVID. And finally, what the implications of these are and some of the considerations that we need to be thinking about going forward in terms of how better to keep children safe online in the future. Everything I'm going to talk about is grounded within the Convention on the Rights of the Child, General Comment number 25. Now, for the last probably 5, 10, 15 years, there's been lots of debates as to how children's rights, as entrenched and grounded in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, translate into the digital space. Do children have the same rights? Are there some rights that apply, some rights that don't apply? After global consultations of the last 2 to 3 years with children, with stakeholders, with policymakers, with experts in academia and researchers, the Committee on the Rights of the Child produced in February of this year, so very timely, the General Comment number 25, which goes to all countries in the world in terms and provides essentially guidance from the CRC as to how children's rights apply in the digital world. And the bottom line is that exactly the same rights that children have entrenched in the Convention on the Rights of the Child apply in the online space. I'm going to draw attention to one section in particular where it reads that state parties should ensure that the operation of effective child protection mechanisms online and the safeguarding policies, while also respecting children's other rights in all settings where children access the digital environment, access the internet, use technology, which includes the home, importantly for this conversation, educational settings, cyber cafes, youth centers, libraries, and healthcare, and alternative settings. So the general comment provides specific direction for school environments and educational environments in terms of some of the considerations and needs to pay attention to. That everything I'm going to talk about is grounded very much within this general comment. And I would encourage everybody who's working in this field to, if you haven't already, familiarize yourself with the general comment and specifically with what it means for schools and educational settings. So these are the sort of headlines that we became very familiar with through COVID. From May last year, these are the sort of headlines that we start to see. Interpol report highlights the impact of COVID-19 on child sexual abuse. From UNICEF, COVID-19, children at heightened risk of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and violence amidst intensifying COVID containment measures. From India, from the UK, from New York Times in the US, we had very, very similar headlines and concerns that are raised throughout the year, both as lockdown measures are enforced, but that continue even once lockdown measures start being lifted in some countries. Online child abuse rising, sharp increase in UK child sexual abuse during the pandemic. Now, these reflect both concerns and in some instances actual data around what the impact of lockdown is likely to have on children's safety more broadly. So there was very little attention paid at this stage to the educational environment, the home environment. It was simply that children spending so much time online are likely to and are going to and are encountering more risks online. The degree to which those risks are translating into harms is only really starting to be understood now. And it's important that we differentiate risks from harms, because we know that some risks are acceptable for children, that children of different ages, as children's capacities evolve, as children grow older, grow more competent, and can make better decisions, develop better cognitive and developmental skills and capacities, that children actually need to encounter some risks in order to learn how to navigate those risks. But at this stage, it was really just this absolute panic and concern and realization that children are encountering more and more of these risks because their entire lives are forced online. To give you an idea, data from one of the biggest global child protection centers, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the US, in 2020 alone, saw a 97.5% increase in reports of child sexual abuse to their helpline. In some instances, the reports have gone up by over 1,000% of reports of exposure to inappropriate content and specifically child sexual abuse material. Most of our concerns have been focused very much on the very extreme forms of risks, things like child sexual abuse material, the content that children encounter online. Less concern has been paid to some of other forms of violence that children experience online and abuse, things like cyberbullying, things like exposure to violent content, things like ongoing sexual harassment, etc. There's been less attention paid to those kind of risks that children face online, with much of the attention focused on child sexual abuse, because those are the more extreme concerns. But I think it's very important when we're coming at this from an education perspective, when we're thinking about what the broad range of risk that children face online, we need to make sure that we are taking into account all of the different risks that children face. We know that in classrooms, in physical classrooms, in some cases, there's not a huge amount of attention paid to bullying by some teachers, because against the general policies of the department, but simply because bullying isn't seen as that serious unless it results in physical harm. And it's the same sort of thing in a lot of instances online. It's only the more extreme risks that we often pay attention to the detriment and the potential harm to children. So we saw children's entire lives going online under very strict lockdown measures. We have to acknowledge that in some areas, and often in many of the township schools, etc., or the schools serving particularly marginalized communities, that lockdown measures often were not as strictly enforced. There was little capacity to do that. But generally across the board, children's lives moved online. Their play, their communication, their teaching and schooling went online. And so we moved from a classroom-based system essentially to a digital-based system. What we're seeing in research that's been undertaken over the past 18 months is some of the impact that has had on children and their lives. In some instances, we're seeing greater levels of depression, high levels of depression. Okay, we're seeing poorer educational outcomes in some areas. We're seeing detachment, we're seeing isolation. Interestingly, in other areas, children seem to be less affected in terms of their mental health and well-being. But generally, if we take it as a sort of generalized effect, the impact on children's well-being and mental health and their stress levels has often been detrimental through the shift into the entire shift into the digital environment. And for many children, they've been poorly equipped to handle this. As we understand more, some of the differences in children's experiences, I think there are a couple of things that we need to pay attention to. First is that of access. So one of the things that I think as basic education as a department, but that we saw across a range of sectors is differential access. And you know, some people talk about the potential for ed tech and for digital learning to be sort of a great equalizer. But the reality of that is that only happens when we have the majority of the population, the bulk of the population, connected to reliable internet access, reliable broadband, and reliable, affordable broadband. And so one of the challenges that basic education had to face is that when teaching went online, if it went online, if schools had the capacity to take it online, that there was hugely differentiated access for their learners. Many learners did not have access to devices, whether they were tablets, whether they were laptops or computers to connect. Many children or households could not afford data to go online. I think in many instances, you know, here tech companies did step up and zero rate a lot of content, but we actually saw the inequalities almost highlighted in terms of access. Similarly with skills and literacy, we saw these huge inequalities in terms of children's own skills and literacies, digital skills and literacies. Why are those two important for protection and for online safety? They're critical because we know that children with little access, children who only go online occasionally, children have lower levels of skills, digital skills and media skills and literacy are more likely to experience harm when they encounter risks online. Okay, so children with low levels of skills and of digital skills and literacy are less equipped to manage risks when they encounter them online. So that has a direct impact on safety as well as the educational outcomes, obviously, through not being able to manage the devices and having the technical expertise to do that. At the same time, there was far less support available through the school system, through referrals, etc., to children because everything was moving online. And many teachers themselves did not have the digital skills, both to provide the sort of the EdTech effectively, to utilize the EdTech effectively, but also to use the online support and referral mechanisms and the online safety settings or to guide children on how to do that. Finally, children experience major issues with their data. Now we know that in many instances, particularly where digital literacy is low, children are not aware of how their data is used. But with the shift of children going online for education and for learning, there was a massive collection of children's data that the system was simply not prepared to manage effectively, to manage safely, and to take the appropriate measures, safeguarding measures, to keep that data safe. There was very little guidance that was produced. Now, these happen to be two UNICEF pieces. I'm not calling out UNICEF because I think the guidance they provided was absolutely critical. This is from East Asia, not from South Africa, but South Africa did produce guidance as well. But most of the guidance and the support for that came out around how to keep children safe and how to support children online was for children themselves and for parents, with very little produced for schools and the education system. I apologize, I'm going through this quite fast, but I just kind of want to get the sort of main points out there. So what were the implications for schools? What we found generally is that the policies that schools and the education system had utilized around technology up to that point really did not equip the education system and schools to support children online and particularly in the context of this kind of tectonic shift where so many more children came online. Up to this point, and in many instances throughout lockdown, schools often, and again, not necessarily following guidance from basic education, but took approaches that did not really enhance children's capacities to stay safe online. Often, when it came to online violence, when it came to children's use of technology, schools would ignore it. They would take a zero tolerance approach. So they might confiscate phones. They might, ban phones in schools or in the classrooms, or ban children using phones at all. By doing that, we take away the opportunities to actually equip children with the skills that they require in order to use technology and the internet and digital technology productively, usefully, to make use of the benefits and to utilize and realize the benefits that being online actually present. And importantly, we don't support and help children grow in the skills that they require in order to stay safe online. By adopting a punitive approach, which had largely been done up to that point by many schools, we don't equip children with the skills, or we can't address the behaviors that sit behind what happens online. There's been a lot of research that's focused on parenting and caregiving. And Livingston and her colleagues have spoken a lot around restrictive parenting, which tend to keep particularly young children safe, but then they don't develop the skills that they themselves require in order to keep children safe as they go online more. The sort of more restrictive policies that had often been followed up to last year also did not equip children with the skills to seek help online, to figure out where reporting, blocking, where do they go to if they're encountering abuse, bullying, requests for explicit information, photos, videos, etc. And so it was a disempowering approach rather than empowering approach. So what do we need to think about as we go forward? And this is my second last slide. I'm very cognitive of time because I usually just ramble on. So the first thing, we need to think about how we construct and we design and we think about policies, school policies. The first thing is we need to think about how we manage data, how schools manage all the data that's being collected, how they manage teaching online. What are the policies that schools have in terms of where children should be? Often, if children are in their bedrooms and they're hopping online for classroom sessions, for teaching sessions, that itself can pose a risk to teachers, to educators that might not, or to anybody who hacks into the system that might not have the best intentions. If we are using WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups for communications with learners, with parents, what are the rules guiding the use of those communications? We have seen in several instances in other parts of the world where I've worked, cases where school children have taken their own lives, following teachers calling them out in class groups, in parents groups, which has resulted in them being bullied and then ended up taking their own lives. How do we guide communication through electronic and digital means? So what are the policies that we have around that? How do we equip teachers to understand those policies? How do we address teachers' own digital skills to manage those and be aware of those consequences? But also, very importantly, what are our data protection policies? What are our data safeguarding policies to manage all the data? How do we make sure that only the teachers, only the people who need to be accessing the data that's collected from children have access to that data? What are the safeguards we're putting in place to firewall children's data that we're collecting, etc.? That's the one. How do we avoid a surveillance culture? General comment number 25 specifically says that children have a right to privacy that is equal to and indivisible from the right to protection, okay, in relation to their evolving capacities. So obviously younger children's right to privacy evolves as they get older, okay? So 6-year-old has, very bluntly, 7-8-year-old has less right to privacy online. 17-year-old. How do we as teachers make sure that right is protected? How do we make sure that we are not engaging in surveillance over those children? Because children, that is a direct violation of the children's right to privacy. And it often prevents them from actually engaging in all the opportunities that children have online. And then how do we as a school, as we're moving online and as we are moving more online, how do we ensure that we are how do we work with teachers to identify when children might be exposed to risks online, when children might be being cyberbullied, when children might be, it's the same sort of risk identification that we want to see in terms of school violence prevention, generally providing care and support to children. How do we identify children at risk, also without stigmatizing or sort of vigiling them? How we children with teachers with skills, what are the response systems? In order for teachers to be able to provide support, they need to know how to report and where to report child sexual abuse material, etc. So we have all of those considerations that need to be taken forward in terms of how we better equip the education system to keep children safe online. I'm going to end with this quote. This was actually about children's play in the context of COVID and going forward. And it was really exploring how children's entire world had moved online. And so all their play had moved online. And this, I think, just to close, kind of indicates how important it is for children that they are given safe spaces online, often away from surveillance as well, but with the tools and with the skills to actually maximize internet use and keep themselves safe. And this quote reads, kids develop a sense of joy when they feel safe in a digital environment and also belonging. Often online space is the only space they can hang out with friends in a way that isn't totally under surveillance by parents and by teachers. And I'm going to thank you for your time. I hope I've kept mostly for time, and I hope that's been useful. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We appreciate your presentation because it has opened us up to being more sensitive about the challenges that children face now that their lives and their learning communities have moved online, and for really raising our awareness of the importance of managing children's data. We've been really focused on what it means to give kids access. It's devices and data for access. And now it's the other side of that continuum and what data safety and security means. Very insightful. Thank you, Patrick. And we wish you a great day further. I know you won't be joining us for questions later, but we will definitely field those towards you via email should they come through to enrich your own engagement. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jen. Thank you.
So now we're going to be turning to Matset Sabali Kliani, the director of a youth-led non-profit company called Agape Youth Movement. This is a really important NGO because what it does is it stimulates the development of youth leadership in schools and then helps us to hear the voices of children and inform the decisions of school communities. And in this way, making sure that children are really a part of the decisions that get made about their lives. So welcome this morning. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And Mr. Kliani's topic this morning is Voices of Learners During COVID-19, Lockdown, Reflections on Virtual Engagements to Advance Violence Prevention and Child Protection. And we look forward to hearing the voices of the children today. Over to you.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much, Patricia. As you said, my name is Matset Sabali Kliani from Agape Youth Movement. Let me greet the DG. According to the program, I see that the DG is here, the DDG, the colleagues from the Department of Education and provinces and districts, colleagues from civil society, academia, and the private sector. I am here in essence just to express and showcase some of the initiatives that we undertook as a way through which we activated learners and we enhanced their resilience during the difficult time. But allow me to just start with a very short video that showcases what is this that I'll be speaking about today. I hope that I'm able to share my screen. I'm quickly just going to play this 3 minutes video and then I'll come back shortly after that.
We're able to see the slides.
You're able to hear the
need to be able to be resourceful. You know the number. Crime Stop, DBV Command Center, all of these numbers, they are there. If you have them, share with your friends. Have them always on your phone. Let's not just go to Twitter and Facebook for likes and photos and all of this retweets.
Also, being a community that cares for each other, being a community that is for each other and not against each other.
As Tete has indicated, that this is a partnership that we are supporting PPE, working together with our partners from UNICEF, Media Monitoring Africa, as well as Electoral TEDAP. I can actually see those smiles. There we go.
Getting the highest level of political support to the cause of young people is critical.
I want to thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear young people talking like this. Join Mamtandi.
There's great leadership skills here. I want to invite you to be digital citizens that actually participate in conversations around digital guys.
That's very interesting. Okay.
As a society, we tend to pay attention to uninteresting things, and it's such a norm in our communities to perpetuate violence. And it's said that even the very same violence that we see on a daily basis, either at home where your mom is getting beaten or there's someone at the corner who's doing something, is taken to social media, and there we make a laugh about it.
And I am the Provincial Junior Commissioner of the Eastern Cape.
We are all doing different interventions in different formats. But what is it that is really works that we can say this is the model for school safety or for youth crime prevention that works in our country, that we can be proud of and be able to share with other countries?
I realized that no man is an island. We all need one another in order to be up there and to actually incorporate everything that we are saying. We need to understand that microaggressions perpetuate violence. That by being with one another and having a strong support system, that's only when we shall be able to implement it.
Working together, confronting difficult issues, we shall create a society where women and children feel safe at all times and in all places. We cannot allow anything, let alone gender-based violence or any form of violence, to stand on the way of the education of our children. All of
as government, we extend condolences to families and friends of women and girl learners who have suffered at the hands of men. We are all equal and allowed to have the same power just as any man has, any man. And cultures also have this thing of private matters in the culture should stay private. We should all learn to speak out against violence, no matter.
So our role as the RCL, specifically during COVID-19, was to keep in touch with our peers, ensuring they stay safe and positive, and constantly encouraging them that they are not alone. That, first and foremost, is what we as the Western Cape RCL has done.
Hi everyone, we as the Millennium Combined School, we would like to give thanks and show appreciation to all the audience of the online safety webinar and everyone who took part in the meeting. To those who missed the Zoom meeting, we were discussing gender-based violence and online safety for all ages. We really learned a lot from this meeting. We've also learned about the Guardian app, whereby we can report crimes anonymously and also get tips on how to surf the internet safely. Guys, let's do a Danke San kid! Danke San!
Thank you very much, colleagues. Patricia, can I please get confirmation from you? Was the video audible?
Yes, it was.
Thank you very much.
It could have been stronger, but we did hear it.
Okay, thank you very much, Patricia. I felt that there was no way that we're going to be speaking about the voices of learners, and I'm not going to start with the video for us to just have a snapshot into what is it that was happening. I'm here in line of this theme that seeks to look at reimagining care and support, taking stock of education, recovery, and continuity. When we see and perceive schools to be places that are meant to provide care and support to learners, then where would learners be when schools are not accessible to these learners? So I am here to showcase a series of learner webinars that was utilized to generate a multi-stakeholder exchange and engage with learners on ways to innovatively address the impact of COVID-19 on them around violence, GBV, and other forms of abuse in the current height of the pandemic. This series of webinars took place from last year, 2020, until mid this year. And the objective in essence of this webinars was to provide an accessible platform for the voices and experiences of learners to be expressed, for us to be able to shape the development of response measures for GBV and violence prevention on children. I'm sure most of us are aware that during the pandemic, especially when we're going in the lockdown season, there were a lot of reports about how women and children were experiencing GBV and violence during that time. And we've needed to find a way through which we can access learners to hear their experiences and their voice. But how did this intervention start? I mean, interventions such as this, they express to us the importance of collaboration across government, civil society, and academia. Following a violence prevention forum meeting, which took place early last year, the Department of Basic Education, in partnership with the German Development Corporation, the United Nations Children's Funds, Media Monitoring Africa, Agape Youth Movement, and the South African Police Service formed an action group on violence prevention and child protection. The action group aimed at providing a coordinated approach to respond to the impact of COVID-19 on the safety of learners from violence and GBV. Now, in this online dialogues or online webinars with learners, we had learners participating, we had educators participating, we had relevant government officials, we had government officials from relevant government department, we had civil society organizations, we had colleagues from academia working on violence and prevention and child protection. We were also privileged in some of the sessions to have our government leaders coming to interact with the learners to find out what their experiences are and what is it that can government jointly with its social partners do in order to enhance their safety and protection as they might be at home. So we had the Deputy Minister, Dr. Jayanam Haule, coming and attending some of the sessions and having a dialogue with some of the learners. We also had in a session that looked specifically at the topic of cyberbullying, we had Deputy Minister Pinky Kekana. We also had MEC Polibishielo, which is the MEC of Education in Limpopo. We had MEC Tandimuraka of Limpopo Department of Sports and Arts and Culture. How did we really do this? I mean, I had the speaker before most spoke about some of the difficulties, the network difficulties, the data difficulties that learners face when they are meant to access online platforms. And online platforms in this regard came to save a lot of us in the work that we do. Through the assistance of partners, provincial and district officials, learners were selected, internet data was distributed to learners. They were prepared to use and join online dialogue, something that most of them have never done. What we see here is this was an opportunity for us to roll out an initiative that prepared learners to utilize online platform in a useful manner. We all know of the digital divide phenomenon. And one thing about it is, one element of the digital divide is some people might not use technology just because they don't know how to utilize it. Learners joined sessions and they were exposed to a series of available resources at their disposal, utilizing online platform through which they can gain assistance when they were at home. When learners came into the sessions, they went into breakaway rooms to have robust conversations which were facilitated on some of the challenges that they faced. How is it that they are coping? How do they, motivate each other to cope based on some of the issues that they face? And where do they need assistance from us, civil society, from government, and other relevant partners? Some of the topics that the learners discussed in this webinars, they spoke about the impact of COVID-19 and how they play their role in ensuring that they keep themselves and their peers safe at home and in schools. They spoke about youth resilience as a protective factor in combating GBV and other societal ills. They spoke about the role of learner leadership agency in schools. And they also were orientated on digital tools to support violence prevention programs. We also had separate sessions for educators that looked at providing educators as caregivers the support to strengthen their mental wellness, because we understood that this pandemic and effects might have taken a toll on educators. There was also an opportunity for learners to showcase their learner-led interventions to prevent violence in schools and in communities. Through this initiative, we were able to reach about 800 learners across the country in selected districts. So one thing that came as a highlight for me is how, through collaboration with the pandemic that no one knew that would hit us, we're able to come together to come up with innovative solutions through which we can get to hear the experiences of learners, so that the responses that we're providing and the support and assistance that we're providing is relevant to what they're facing as a challenge. And because this was such an innovative approach, something that we had to come up with, we also saw a range of other interventions coming from some of the great lessons that we got from this series, from this webinar series. I mean, going forward with UNICEF and DBE, we also found a way through which we can continue to innovate and adapt the delivery of a life skills program and keep learners engaged through what we call a Sports for Development life skills program, through sessions that were conducted on online platform. And through the Sports for Development intervention, that was really, through which its adaptation was really based on the lessons that we got from the webinars. We were able to reach about 2,135 learners from about 5 provinces. And in essence, through these ones, one learner would participate in a series of 17 sessions over 5 weeks, 1 hour per day for 3 days a week. The learner receives data, takes their mobile phone, and access a 1 hour session in which they interact with their peers, and they also interact with any topic that would enhance their resilience. Learners were discussing about self-esteem and social skills, communication skills, online etiquette, knowledge of HIV and AIDS and gender-related issues, setting and achieving goals, cyber ills, stereotypes, peer pressure, digital and media literacy skills, because we understood that learners also needed to be orientated on how to best utilize online platform, how to be responsible and safe on online platform, looking at what happened last year in Limpopo, where we had a case of cyberbullying. So learners needed to understand the power that they have on their fingertips. And we will be proceeding with some of these interventions because we realize that with the pandemic, there's a new opportunity for us. There's a new opportunity presented to us not to miss the 4th industrial revolution's a digital wave. How do we innovate, adapt some of the programs that we're implementing to support learners and ensure that schools are places of care and support? Back back in the years, I used to ask myself, how can we change how we do youth development and learner leadership support? And through these interventions, there are a series of lessons that we're able to learn that even, I remember earlier this year when UNICEF had to present in their Barcelona International Conference on how the sports for development interventions across the world was affected in the pandemic. South Africa, if it was not the only country, was able to present how it was very innovative and utilize online platforms to continue supporting learners and ensuring that education is strengthened and learners are safe during these testing times. I will end my presentation there. Thank you very much, Patricia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kliani. We really appreciated your presentation, and the video was fantastic. It brought us into your process, and the delight of the leadership was palpable. They clearly were as excited as the kids who joined some of those sessions, and you could feel that. And also to say that the innovation really lies in you being the organization that walked the talk, because you prevented violence by becoming the online safe space for learners during COVID. And just to commend the Agape team and also our partners who really joined the vision for this intervention and elevated the important pillar of prevention in our national strategic plan to end gender-based violence and femicide in our country. We wish you well, and we've invited people on our platform today. I think we're sitting with over 360 people. Their questions will be posted. If you stay with us, as soon as we finish our 3 sessions this morning, we'll bring you back in and you can engage with our audience and respond to some of their questions. Thank you very much. Have a great day further. All right, we move our attention now to Matotsi Amisi. This is a really fabulous scholar. We really commend her work in violence prevention. She has currently holding a research consultancy position at the Institute for Security Studies, as well as being based at Wits University at the Center for Learning and Evaluation of Results. Dr. Amisi's credentials as a researcher are so well respected, and today we are brought into some of her thinking and contributions to violence prevention that have emerged over a number of years. Situated most significantly within the Violence Prevention Forum, which is a multi-sectoral community that comes together to seek collective understandings and sense of purpose for what it means to prevent violence in our communities. And today we are going to hear from some of the evidence that is available for violence prevention that will inform all of our efforts. Thank you for joining us, and over to you, Matotsi.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for that introduction. And I'm quite delighted to be here to share some of the findings from the project that we just did. And thank you to the department for the invitation. I think this is an extension of our ongoing partnerships to find a solution to one of the most pressing challenges that we face as a country. So without wasting any more time, I will get on to the presentation. So today I'm going to speak to present findings from an evidence review that we just completed. This is an evidence review of interventions to prevent violence against women and children. And we were looking at interventions that were implemented in South Africa from about 1990 to about 2021, but most of them actually were sort of done around 1999 to about 2021. And what we were asking ourselves was a question around how and in what context do interventions impact perpetration and victimization. and how can these interventions, the lessons that we have learned, be implemented at scale, because we know a lot of things are happening, but they tend to be happening in small scale, in small organizations, in communities. But we wanted to see, can we identify things that can help us to take them to scale? We were not necessarily interested in finding interventions to be scaled up. That wasn't necessarily our objective, but our objective was to be able to pull out those contextual factors, those principles, approaches, and activities that can help us to move violence prevention forward. What lessons can we learn from interventions that have been tested in South Africa? That was the kind of question that we were asking ourselves. And the review was done in 4 phases. The first phase was really about engaging with stakeholders in the ecosystem, which included even some of the officials from the Department of Basic Education, colleagues from Department of Women, Social Development, but also NGOs that are implementing programs and other people who are involved in research, for us to clarify what will be most useful, what is sort of the pressing policy question that this review must answer. And that informed the way that we extracted data, the way that we went through the studies that we were reviewing, and the data that we were extracting about those interventions. And then phase 3 involved a quality assessment, because we wanted to make sure that if we are going to be advising on any lessons that we have learned from interventions, that they are based at least on rigorous evaluation or rigorous research processes. And the last part was us analyzing what the evidence is telling us, and extrapolating what are the policy implications and implementation implications. This whole process was supported by an external reference group, which did include some of the people that I mentioned, some of the stakeholders that I mentioned earlier, because we wanted to make sure that the review was useful, not just an academic process, but it was useful for practice and for policy. So what does this review actually involve? A review is basically a research process where you try to get or pull together findings from a number of research studies. Each individual research study, each individual evaluation study will assess an individual program, and they will tell you whether that program worked or not and what lessons they've learned. But a review is slightly different in that you are reading the evidence across a number of papers, which means you're looking at different interventions tested in different places, and you're trying to see what are the common themes that emerge, what are the common lessons that we can learn from that. And we were working with about 60 studies. 57 of those were coming from an evidence map that we did with the University of Johannesburg and University of Witwatersrand, and the Violence Prevention Forum that Patricia mentioned in the introduction, some 2-3 years ago. But then we added additional papers of any of the papers that were published afterwards. One of the things that I must just say up front is that an evidence review obviously is a review of evidence, right? So it excludes, by design, some of the interventions that might be happening at community level, but where they have not written up their results, where they've not been as a formal assessment of those interventions. So that's definitely one limitation to sort of keep in mind. This is an overview of the type of interventions we're looking at. And we were looking at both violence against women and violence against children. And we're looking at about 6 or 8 types of intervention. And this were drawn out from sort of international frameworks, national legislation, national responses. So we drew out from these international frameworks and national frameworks types of interventions that we are likely to find. And we got these categories. And the first category was norms and values. So all the interventions that are intervening in society, in communities, intervening in schools, intervening with parents to deal with norms and values that underpin violence. And then we looked at interventions that were intervening with parents and caregivers to provide support to deal with harsh parenting, to reduce harsh parenting, to improve positive parenting. Looked at interventions that were dealing with laws or assessing the effectiveness of laws and policies, economic strengthening, response services, in our definition of prevention, we didn't, we applied sort of the approach that South African legislation and policies have applied, which is seeing prevention in a continuum and not just focusing on primary prevention. So we included response services and interventions that are implemented to deal with the consequences of exposure to violence. And with the norms and values, we also separated interventions that included norms and values, but then had an additional component like economic strengthening, or that included norms and values and parent and caregiver support. And this is what you see here is the distribution. What you see here is the distribution of papers. As you can see, a lot of the interventions are concentrated in addressing norms and values. I wanted to show you an overview of what the evidence tells us. And as you can see, about 51% of the papers of the research found positive, found mixed findings rather. And what that means is that they had positive outcomes in some violence-related outcomes, and then negative or inconclusive outcomes for others. And then 46% had positive findings. And then similarly, when you break it down and you just look at the literature that was looking at violence against children, you see a similar pattern where majority found mixed findings. This does not necessarily mean that the findings are not good. It also highlights the complexity of the issue that we're talking to, because a lot of the kind of complex studies tend to find mixed findings, obviously, because they have a lot of variables that they're trying to assess. I think what's probably positive, depending on how we look at it, is that you're seeing less studies with negative findings. Of course, this could just be a publication bias, but the reason why I'm saying that could be positive is that it shows us that we do have a good base to draw from. We do have enough to draw from on lessons of what works in South Africa, or what shows promise. That's probably what we're most comfortable to say, what shows promise in the South African context. The other thing that I wanted to just show you in terms of overview before I go into the details finding is just the quality of the research that we drew from. As you can see, about 58%, so nearly 60% of the papers were based on solid, strong designs, quality research process. So that means that we can trust the evidence that's been generated. And 34% were moderate, and only about 8% were poor quality or weak quality. And when we have doubts on the quality of the evidence, we do sort of raise it so that if you're looking at it, wanting to make decisions on the basis of it, you can see that. So I'm going to just run through what the findings tell us, and I'm going to focus only on those findings that deal with violence against children. So when it comes to interventions that were focusing on norms and values, I think what they highlight is that it is important to address some of the embedded norms and values that drive perpetration of violence in intimate relationships between adolescents, but also between parents, in how parents are disciplining their children and they're engaging with their children. And that those interventions do show some positive outcomes. Some of them show mixed outcomes, but overall, those interventions to address norms and values show promise that they can change the way that parents are relating to their children, the way parents are disciplining their children, and the way that children view and understand relationships with each other, and towards more positive engagements. And then that's a good thing. We had two studies that were looking at a school as a site of intervention, and in a way they were treating the school as an intervention. One of the paper was assessing school connectedness, and what they found was that children who were positively connected to a school were at reduced risk at taking risk-taking behavior that made them vulnerable to violence. So what that meant was that children who stayed in school, children who had positive connection to their schools, were protected from victimization and also from perpetrating violence. One study tested the idea of separating boys and girls to see if that will protect girls from violence. And what they found was that placing girls in same-sex schools, though it protected girls from sexual violence, it did not protect girls from other forms of violence. And that raised questions about how we frame interventions to deal with peer-on-peer violence within schools, because they found that even when girls were separated, amongst girls themselves, there were high levels of verbal abuse and verbal and physical violence with each other. The one thing that's really important to highlight with these studies, even though there were just two, is just the importance of the school environment in protecting children against violence, and obviously the involvement of their teachers and caregivers. In terms of parent and caregiver support, and this, I mean, of course, this kind of parent and caregiver support interventions tend to happen in communities and not necessarily within schools. But what I wanted to highlight is that we're seeing that interventions that are working with parents outside, with caregivers, with parents outside of the school, are showing positive impact. They're showing promise with a growing body of robust evidence that if we intervene to help parents with the care of their children, that increases positive parenting, that increases positive relationships between parents and children. And that secure attachment is critical because children who are securely attached to their caregivers are protected from violence. But also that positive attachment shows up also in other environments, in schools, for example, and how they relate to other children. So it's got positive impact that goes beyond just the relationships with their parents. The review also found that interventions that combine addressing norms and values with parent and caregiver support component, it show an increased improvement in positive relationships between children and parents. And this was particularly true for those interventions that were intervening with adolescents. They found that there was improvements as adolescents and their caregivers were improving in their communication, improving in how they're engaging with one another. That improved their mental health well-being, well-being of adolescents, but also their parents. And that's incredibly powerful findings because adolescents, they're going through such a rapid change in their lives, and if they are having positive relationships with their caregivers, where they can talk to them about things that they're experiencing, it reduces their vulnerability to exploitation and also vulnerability to different forms of violence, and also from taking risky behavior that puts them in harm's way. I'm gonna, I think this is an important thing to sort of stress out. This is an issue about what we found is that interventions that were effective working with parents and caregivers were those that were culturally and contextually relevant. What does that mean? It means that instead of imposing strategies that parents find culturally dissonant, the interventions that are sustainable are those that work within the beliefs and cultural systems of communities, of parents, and work to change obviously things that are problematic, but strengthen the positive elements of those cultures. And that's an important findings when we think about intervening, whether it be in schools or in communities. We looked at also interventions that we're providing response services. We know that there's high rates of violence in the country, and a lot of children would have already been exposed to some form of violence. And so looking at what interventions work to reduce harm from that exposure was important for the review. And what we found is that there are interventions that are showing positive or promising results that intervening even with young boys who have already committed sexual violence, that there are interventions that show reduction in recidivism and also in assumptions of responsibility. And that also intervening with girls who have experienced sexual violence does help in rebuilding interpersonal connectedness and reducing isolation, and therefore reconnecting and reattaching them back with their families, with their caregivers, which protects them from future violence. Economic strength and interventions also show positive results. And this is incredibly important when we're having discussions about grants and extending social protection, because we find that by just providing girls and their families with financial resources, that this is what one study found, that it reduced intimate partner violence by at least 34%. And the reason why that happened was because girls with financial means, with access to financial means, were at a reduced chances of engaging in transactional sexual relations. And this is an incredibly important finding, because this is it wasn't a lot of money that had that impact. I'm going to end with just some conclusions. So what are the lessons that we've learned from this? The lessons is that one, context is critical. So one intervention that works in one school or in one community will not work just like that in another community. It has to be adapted to that context. It has to work within the context within which it's being implemented. It is incredibly important for children to remain connected to school. Children who are connected to school are protected from risk-taking behavior, but also from exposure to violence. Parenting programs are important. They are reducing harsh parenting and improving parent-child relationships. What the implications are is that even interventions that are being implemented in schools, for example, need to find ways of connecting with parents, with caregivers, to strengthen and make sure that the impact that you're seeing from school or within schools are also being transferred within homes, or what's happening within homes is being transferred back to the schools. We also see that it's incredibly important to intervene early when children are still receptive to change. And with interventions that are dealing with sexual violence, intervening before sexual debut seems to show more positive impact and more likelihood to achieve positive results. Intervention to address DBV in adolescent relationships, for example, are more effective when they include both boys and girls, and not separating boys and girls, or only intervening with boys or only intervening with girls. We need to change both, or address problematic areas in both. Access to grants for adolescents can have transformative effect. It can help children, particularly young girls, and protect them from engaging in intersectional sex. Ensuring service delivery in poor communities removes some of the environmental stress that makes parenting parenting and caregiving so difficult. You can just imagine what it's like for parents who are still struggling with access to services like water, toilets, how that stress can transfer in how they're parenting their children. Lastly, effective management and supervision and care of staff who are delivering services, whether be it teachers or additional NGOs that are providing services, is incredibly important, because they carry such heavy burden and such heavy caseloads that if we're not caring for them, they experience compassion fatigue, they experience vicarious trauma, and it weakens the effectiveness of their ability to provide quality care. And so that's what we see from the evidence that we have reviewed. And what it shows us is that there is a great deal that we can build on. There's a lot that we have learned as a country. And there's a lot of capacity that's spread out, and we can build on it and we can strengthen it to reduce or prevent violence in the country. Thank you very much, and that's where I'm going to stop.
Thank you very much, Matodzi and Sarah, for undertaking this research. I am so inspired by your concluding slide, because it really does provide us with the strategic direction that people differently positioned across civil society, academia, government, and business can align, because we need to touch on all of those areas in one way or another in the work that we're doing in order to ensure that we diligently create environments and responses that prevent violence against children. I'm also really encouraged by, your focus on how schools provides protection to children, and that not being in school is going to raise the risk of vulnerability. And we heard quite a lot yesterday about the vulnerabilities that children experienced when they were locked down in homes that weren't safe. And the day before, we heard about in the symposium that led up to CSTL, was the importance of comprehensive sexuality education. And in your concluding slide, you draw attention to these interventions as clustering together to provide strength to what it means to make children's lives safer. I'm also encouraged that the challenge against corporal punishment is one that involves both parents and teachers. So I'm not sure if there was any papers covering corporal punishment that is enacted by teachers, but the department has a protocol for the reporting of corporal punishment at school, and we continue to really advocate for its implementation, because teachers are also parents, and it's one of the ways in which we can work with DSD to make sure that our care of children is non-violent. Thank you very much. I'm sure we could have a seminar on each of the bullets that you presented in that concluding slide. And also there's some gaps. If we think about our INSPIRE framework and the fact that that is an acronym for all the areas of intervention to prevent violence against children, and where our current research and body of research doesn't speak to all of those areas, but emphasizes norms in particular. So we're going to move now, Matoz, if you'd move with me, and Mr. Kliani will come back online, and we're going to have a look at the questions that our online audience have posed for us today. And I'm going to start by answering the first question, and that is, when will we see all of these presentations, and how will we share them with our wonderful audience that has joined us from the length and breadth of our country? So the platform that the link that you have to this platform is going to stay live for the next month. And on the left-hand side of your screen where it says live stream, you're going to have a drop-down menu there where presentations will be loaded as we receive these from our speakers. And we will start uploading these presentations from Tuesday next week. So please look out for that, and keep the link and your password to this platform, because you will need it in order to download those presentations that are of interest to you. All right, so we are going to now look at the one of the questions that have been posted on our chat, and I invite everybody to please post their questions under the question chat space on the right-hand side of your screen. I see that Managa Pillay has asked us to consider this particular question. COVID caught us off guard and exposed the inequalities in this space. How do we now equalize the playing fields? Knowing what we know now and appreciating that online modalities are here to stay, how are we going to, moving forward, equalize those realities? And then an embedded question is also, how do we speak to the issues of parents online and parent literacy, since they have a guardianship role in making sure that children are safe online? So I think in Managa's question, it's a two-in-one, and I'd like to now ask our speakers to please come in and share some of your insights. I'm also aware that a number of your presentations have already begun to answer Managa's question and stimulate our thinking. So over to the panelists. Kliani, I see you're online. Would you like to respond?
Thank you very much, Patricia. I mean, I think this is an opportunity for us to not forget anyone. What do I mean? I mean, now with this wave of utilizing digital platforms in information communications technology to do education, we're still very much in the beginning. And it takes time to create a divide. And I think the first thing that one should express is we don't need to miss it. If we miss it from here, we might not even be able to catch up. We understand that there is knowledge that the young people, the educators and parents must have, or skills, digital skills that they must have in order to fully make use of these digital platforms, not to be left behind by any development. So I would suggest that we ensure that we invest in programs or interventions that provides resources and that provides capacity strengthening to all those that need to utilize this. We have a lot of people that might be in rural areas and townships, and we need not forget them, because currently where we are in the country, we find that there's some inequalities when compared to those that are in very much affluent areas of the country. So investing in resources, in strengthening capacities to make the most out of digital platforms, not to be left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Matozi?
Yeah, I think just building on that, it's been incredible to see organizations also that are working on the ground try and adapt to make sure that we do exactly what Sese you were saying, because, you know, part of the Violence Prevention Forum, we've had the South African Parenting Program Implementers Network, and some of them have been providing, for example, after school care programs to children. And then with the lockdown and everything, it was quite difficult to provide them, and they had to move online. But online, in some cases where you have, you know, less resources, does not mean complex systems. Sometimes it means really connecting to people through WhatsApp, teaching children or helping children with their homework by calling them when when they don't have data, the families do not have data, buying airtime for those families so you can be able to talk to them. So there are also low tech and low key tools that that organizations are utilizing to stay connected with children and with families that need help, with all the challenges that we're facing now with the pandemic. And I think that's an incredibly important thing to learn from also.
Thank you very much. So online participants, I would like to draw your attention now to our poll. It's on the right-hand side of your screen. And here we're asking you to consider which element should the DBE focus on to make even greater strides in the achievement of its care and support for teaching and learning goals. And you're given two options in the vote. The first one is to strengthen multi-sectoral partnerships, and the second, increased capacity building within the department to address challenges. So I invite all of you to please vote, and when we come back from tea, we will find out the outcome of our poll. And we're looking now at 1:15, and can I please ask everybody to be back at 10:30. That's giving us 15 minutes for a body break and to get something to drink. See you back at 10:30. Bye.
Pumlani is an 11-year-old boy from Southern Africa. He was born with HIV. Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest HIV and AIDS prevalence in the world. Living with HIV presents serious challenges for children such as Pumlani, at home and at school. At home, he was deprived of the love and support of a caring family. His father had abandoned him when he was a baby, and his mother had died from an AIDS-related illness. His aunt took him in, and he lives with her and his cousins in a small house in a rural area. But poverty makes life difficult for the family, and Pumlani's needs went unnoticed. Pumlani did not participate in school life and had no friends. As each day passed, he was less and less able to keep up with the work, and his interest in school dwindled. Pumlani was often absent from school due to poor health, and when he did attend, he was always tired and sometimes dozed off. Historically, as centers of learning, schools focused on education only, often assuming that children's health and overall well-being was taken care of at home. But conventional care and support systems have been heavily strained by burdens such as HIV and AIDS, orphaning, deepening poverty, drought, and food insecurity. However, through the Care and Supports for Teaching and Learning, or CSTL program, driven by education ministries in the respective member states, schools in the Southern African development community are being transformed into inclusive centers of care and support. They have become hubs for integrated service delivery that include supporting learners' materials, nutritional, psychosocial, protection, safety, and health needs. CSTL was formally adopted by all 15 SADC member states in 2008 as a comprehensive, coordinated, multi-sectoral response to address the multiple challenges that make children vulnerable to education marginalization that threatens their rights to quality education. After participating in CSTL training on identifying and supporting vulnerable children, Pumlani's class teacher was motivated to act. She took his case to her school support team. The team discussed Pumlani's needs with his aunt, referred him for HIV counseling and testing, assisted him to access antiretroviral treatment, and provides ongoing psychosocial support for him at school. With improved health and support to live positively with HIV, his absenteeism has decreased and his academic performance has improved. He participates in extramural activities such as the school's Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights Club, where he is a loud voice, reminding his peers to know their status and take care of their health.
back, everybody, from tea break, and that is a welcome back to 373 participants that are with us online today for the 2021 CSTL conference. The third day of this conference is focusing on child safety, food security and material support. And the second half of our day is going to turn attention to food security. With me in studio is Karina Muller. She is an official at the National Department of Basic Education based in school nutrition. And she's a seasoned educator and a very well-respected dietitian who brings these two knowledge areas together to ensure that children get healthy meals at school. Today, Karina will be speaking to us about food security and what it meant for the state to keep the National School Nutrition Program running during COVID, and especially during the periods of lockdown when schools were also locked down to varying degrees, depending on which lockdown level we all were in. Over to you, Karina. Please share with us the challenges you overcame in your delivery of food security in the last 2 years.
Thank you, Dr. Watson, and good morning to all the CSTL participants today. I am presenting today on the National School Nutrition Program and our operations during the COVID-19 lockdown, our challenges and responses. Now, to look at the presentation in context, we're just going to look at the NSNP legal framework and also the quality that we bring to the National School Nutrition Program and the funding models and delivery models that will affect the implementation of the program. And then we look at the impact that the COVID had on all our program and the implementation of that. Now, if you look at the NSNP in context, the program was initiated in 1994 by the former president, Mr. Nelson Mandela, and what was good about it, there was political will, and with the political will, the nutrition programs got funding from government. Now, basic education implement currently the program to 9.7 million learners in approximately 21,000 schools, including primary, secondary, and special schools. This program, the National School Nutrition Program, is also aligned to the National Development Plan, where we try to support and eliminate poverty and support food security until our goals in 2030. Now, also, the program is linked to Goal 25 in the DBE's Action Plan 2020, where we look at learner well-being. And this links with the CSTL program that we have with the conference today, where we look at the basic rights and protection of children and that we support and address the barriers to learning. Then, if you look at the NSNP and legal framework, the NSNP links to the South African Constitution, where we say in section 28(1)(c) that every child has the right to a basic nutrition, and in section 27(1)(b) the right to access to food. So this is according to the National Development Plan to eliminate poverty and support food security, as I mentioned. But with the NSNP specifically, because it's government funded, we align with the Division of Revenue Act. And this means we get a conditional grant. And with the conditional grant, there's a framework which is gazetted annually that directs the implementation. So for the 2021 financial year, the grant was allocated 8.2 billion. So it's a big responsibility for the Department of Education to ensure that all our qualifying learners benefit from a nutritious meal. So quality in the NSNP, just to look at it quickly, we want safe transportation for our food to the schools. We look at quality products, fresh produce that's served daily with the meals, volunteer food handlers, safety, and then we look at good quality equipment and kitchens up to standard. Then with the funding and delivery models, we sometimes get questions on why do we implement differently, and the systems that we do our funding is different in provinces. We've got a centralized model which implements in 5 provinces and a decentralized model that implements in 4 provinces. And how this is working is that all the provinces get apply or get a compliant NSNP menu, and then the menu are procured in different ways. In the centralized provinces, a tender is awarded. In the decentralized provinces, funds are transferred directly to schools, where the food is procured and then the meals are cooked, and then we say we serve a nutritious lunch meal on time. On time is around 10 in the morning to ensure that the learners benefit as early as possible from a nutritious meal. The impact of COVID-19 on the NSNP was quite severe because in April to May 2020, schools were closed. So during no schooling, no school meals were served during the strict lockdown levels. Although as a Plan B, DBE supported Department of Social Development by applying funds from disaster relief to provide food parcels to households where the learners will also benefit. The learners returned around the 8th of June, where the reopening of schools had a phased-in approach. All the learners that attended school were served with meals. But in July 2020, there was a judgment handed by the North Gauteng High Court ordering the DBE to provide food to all qualifying learners immediately. This had quite an impact on the NSNP, as this meant, regardless of lockdown, if the learners are in school or not, the learners that qualify are supposed to receive their meals. So it assisted as of the 24th of August, all learners returned to school, but on rotational timetables. And the next slide will show it really affected the NSNP. With our main challenges with the COVID-19, we had to change our framework to adjust that all qualifying learners receive meals, and I'll elaborate in a minute. There were rotational timetables, so some learners were at school, some were not. And then there was challenges around learner transport and the communication that were needed to ensure that the availability of the NSNP during lockdown are communicated to the school community. Now, with the NSNP responses, the first what we've done is we've amended the grant framework to include personal protective equipment for our volunteer food handlers. This is the members or the food handlers that cook the food for the children at school. We ensured that there's food parcels, and we trained on hygiene and safety measurements. Then we, as part of the framework, we included 3 feeding modalities. We first say we stand by our cooked meals served to learners attending school. Then we also said learners can collect meals, cooked meals at school if they not attend, but it's important that they adhere to social distancing and wearing masks. We also made a further amendment where we said learners not attending a specific school but living closer to another school can collect their meals at the closest school, but they should wear a school uniform for identification purposes to ensure that it's only learners that goes to school and benefit from the meals. Then another adjustment that we've done, we included food parcels that can be collected or distributed to learners. Further responses of the NSNP, the learner or scholar transport available was still used, but there was no additional scholar transport for learners to collect and the meals and go home. Then also provinces needed to provide communication on availability of meals on various platforms. They can use circulars to schools and then to parents, local radio stations and newspapers. So the advocacy initiatives were very important, so to ensure that the school meals are widely advocated to ensure that all the qualifying learners benefit. So the use of social media platforms, radio slots, circulars, and to ensure that hesitant learners and parents that fear the COVID-19 impact on their learners will come to school and collect the meals or eat the meals at schools. Nutrition education is another important focus area of the NSNP, where we use digitized resource material, where we produce video clips on health and safety, posters for schools and food handlers on the COVID-19 protocols to ensure that we adhere and keep our learners safe at school. Then here's an example of a poster where we indicate the food safety and hygiene protocols that we would like to be observed in school. Then in conclusion, it is very important that during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ministry of Education has resolved to ensure that all qualifying learners benefit from the NSNP to enhance food security in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karina, for that informative presentation, and really to commend the school nutrition team for keeping food security top of mind during the lockdown and responding to the needs of children in schools. Very appreciated. I'm sure all the children in the country that receive those meals would give you a high five to say thanks for thinking of us and making sure that you were agile enough to make the changes that were necessary to keep those meals coming. Colleagues on the floor out in the digital audience, please post your questions online, and we will take the questions for the next three presentations. At the end of all three presentations, Karina is going to stay with us and be ready to respond in a little bit. We're going to move now to our next presenter, Sanjeev Raghubir, who's the Group Sustainability Manager for Shoprite Holdings. And Sanjeev, you are responsible for making sure that the footprint is minimized across the whole value chain of readying food and putting it on the road, so that when we see it on the shelves in our shops, you will have made sure that our planet has been harmed, has experienced the least amount of harm. So thank you very much, and we welcome you today to speak to us on food distribution and what it means to augment nutritional support during COVID-19 and how you were able to do this through partnerships. Over to you, Sanjeev.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for having us as the Shoprite Group on this platform. And colleagues, let me start by sharing my presentation.
Thanks. We can see the slides.
Okay, are you able to see the title slide? Is the title slide clear?
Yes, it's showing clearly. It's got strawberries on a truck.
Okay, fantastic.
Shoprite's name.
Fantastic. Yeah, good morning again. So my name is Sanjeev Raghubir. I'm the Group Sustainability Manager at the Shoprite Group. And what I'm going to show you or take you through in the next couple of minutes is around our hunger relief and nutritional support during the COVID-19 pandemic. But as a start, let me give you a quick overview of Shoprite. The Shoprite Group, you'll be familiar with some of these brands or maybe all of these brands, Shoprite, Checkers, USave, House and Home, OK, CompuTicket. So quite a big basket of brands. To give an idea of the scale and the size of the company, there's more than 2,500 corporate stores in Africa, And added to that is a further more than 500 franchise stores also across Africa. There's 18 different brands operating in 13 different industries. And by that, I mean the industries of food, pharmaceuticals, alcohol, financial services, etc. Also, more than 1,000 or more than 142,000 employees across the company, across Africa. And quite tellingly, serving over 24 million people in our shops every day. So it gives you an idea of the type of scale of the company, but also of the impact and the influence it has in the countries that it operates in, particularly in South Africa, in the communities that we operate in. So to start off with our interventions on food security and nutrition during COVID, I think a good starting point is the company's purpose and values. And at the core of the company is our ambition to be Africa's most affordable, accessible, and innovative retailer on the continent. And that's a very important starting point, because whatever we do has to be linked to and has to be embedded within that purpose. Coming out of that are the values of the company. And there are three values that we have. The first one is doing the right thing. And that's really about the excellence that we have in our execution, the excellence we have in our operations. It's about integrity, and it's about care. Care for our employees, care for the communities that we operate in, care for the environment, care for our suppliers, and care for all of our stakeholders. And I think that's quite important in terms of that value. The second value is around saving to share. And it talks about how the company is or tries to be as efficient as it can. And by being efficient, then it is able to share that savings with its customers and its consumers by offering them the most affordable prices on the continent. So efficiency is also important from an environmental sustainability perspective, because the more efficient you are, it means you're using less resources and you're producing less waste. Also importantly is our third value of developing local. And that talks to growth within the company, growth within the communities that we operate in, as well as sharing opportunities in terms of employment and transformation within our company and within our wider supply chain. So when COVID started, and I'll take you back to the beginning of last year, and it might feel like a distant and a long time ago, and some of these aspects that I cover might jog back some of your memory, but I think it's important to put some of these into context. So already at the beginning of the year, when we started hearing about COVID-19 internationally, we started looking at switching some of our supply chains. Very soon after that, the importance and the criticalness of cleaning surfaces and ensuring that surfaces were hygienic and our workplaces were hygienic, we started increasing the hygiene and cleaning levels within our stores. We also started with dedicated till points for vulnerable consumers. And then the real big sort of onslaught of COVID came, and there was a lot of customers panic buying and stockpiling. And that happened towards the third week in March. And we had to ensure and communicate to consumers that there was still sufficient stock in the supply chain to prevent people from going out and stockpiling and panic buying. At the same time, the group announced its appreciation bonus to its staff in excess of 102 million rands. And then other activities followed thereafter in terms of accelerating our 60/60 deliveries so that people could shop online. Also pivoting some of our business that was business to business, and we changed that to business to consumers. An important entrant was also the launch of our U-Save trucks. And this was really to support communities that were not serviced by stores and by shops. And during the lockdown, it meant that they couldn't travel. So we were basically bringing supermarkets into communities. bringing supermarkets with supermarket prices so that people could still do some shopping that they needed. Around the same time, we started supporting the Solidarity Fund in terms of making donations available or customers to donate at our till points. And that started around then as well. On the work front, more than 2,000 people were able to work from home around that time as well. Then in the beginning of April, we deployed mobile clinics across the country to support our staff. There were priority checkouts for essential workers, which we started. And then also personal protective equipment and support to our staff in terms of a holistic wellness program as well. And at that time, I mean, if you cast your mind back, we will understand and appreciate the importance of retail workers on the front line, because they were literally on the front line, supporting communities, ensuring that there was still food on the shelves and that they were able, and consumers and customers could still come into the stores and purchase what they needed to. You will also recall the different legislation and the different laws that were coming in at the same time. It was very difficult to trade in those kind of circumstances, yet somehow we managed, because the laws and the regulations were changing on a weekly basis. And there was also a mixed understanding and interpretation of some of the legislation that was coming through. Some of it we can look back and smile at in terms of things like the stopping of selling of cooked meals. But others, we appreciate the importance of and the necessity of these regulations. Contactless payments were also started at the same time. And then there were the sort of ups and downs with regards to trading in liquor. But importantly, I'm ending this slide on the fact that we decided to increase our fleet of mobile soup kitchens. So the group had about 19 mobile soup kitchens that were going out every day, serving communities in events in the most vulnerable of households. And we increased that to 27 because we anticipated that there was going to be a huge impact with people not being able to work, people not being able to earn, and hunger and food relief was going to be extremely important. So for that reason, the group decided to extend its fleet. And during that lockdown period, we served more than 9 million meals of soup through surplus food donations as well. So with that in mind, I thought, let me give you an overview of our community programs for the ShopRite Group. It's focused on hunger relief and food security. And within that, within that theme, we've got 3 programs, which is our community and household food gardens, our mobile soup kitchens, and surplus food donations. Other areas that we support as a group are early childhood development centers, and then there's various other community support that we provide as well. And I'll try and unpack these in a little more detail in the following slides. So in terms of our community food gardens, there's more than 150 at the moment, community food gardens across South Africa. And we support more than 2,000 household food gardens. And the real intention here is to build that community and household level food security. As we saw during COVID, the importance of hunger relief and food security. But also in future, we know that climate change will have a huge impact on our communities, particularly the low income communities, and particularly the most vulnerable in our society. We know that it's the most vulnerable in society that are impacted the most when it comes to climate disasters like floods, fires, and droughts. And for us, it's important to be able to support these communities, not only during those times, but to help them build a bit of resilience and to be adaptive when these types of conditions and adverse climate conditions start happening. So in terms of these gardens, we partner with Food Entries for Africa in providing a 18-month training and mentorship program on equipping and supporting the communities to grow their own food gardens. The training includes organic farming methods, water conservation methods, and there's even a business element to it as well, so that the communities can sell and sustain themselves with some of the surplus that they have. At the same time, we've now engaged and started engaging at a household level to support communities to be able to grow food and to grow their own gardens so that they can grow nutritious food in their gardens. Then there's the ShopRite mobile soup kitchens. We've got a fleet of these that go out on a daily basis, serving communities, serving during disasters. During the COVID, more than or just under 5 million meals were served. And the meals that are served is a nutritious soup, which is specifically designed with added nutrition and bread, so that communities that are facing disasters can at least have a warm meal, and we're able to deploy this immediately when there's a disaster. The image there you see is as recent as this week, where one of our soup trucks was deployed to the George area after the recent heavy rains and flooding, so that they could support and provide relief to communities on the ground immediately. So it gives you an idea of the kind of support, the kind of interventions we can do with these mobile soup kitchens. Then the other area that we focus on is on the donation of surplus food. And this is food from our stores, from our supermarkets, that is still fit for human consumption, that we aren't able to necessarily sell in the stores. And we donate that to more than 450 beneficiary organizations or charities across the country. So if you imagine, or if you think back to the number of stores that we have and that we're donating across the country, there's quite a number of beneficiary organizations that are supported through this program. And last year, in the last financial year, more than 138 million rands worth of surplus food and goods was donated through this program. And it supports a range of beneficiary organizations, from creches to orphanages to old age homes, community centers, quite a range of beneficiary organizations. And then there's the early childhood development centers. We support more than 103 ECDs across South Africa, benefiting just over 5,000 children. And here the support is in 3 ways, in terms of training the practitioners and the headmaster to provide a quality education or quality supervision and education for the learners, for the children. We support them in terms of nutrition as well. We, through our partners, the Lunchbox Fund, we provide nutrition to and meals to the ECDs. And then we also support in terms of some of the infrastructure development and infrastructure improvement. During COVID, this sector was quite impacted because they were open, they were closed, there were regulations for them, and it was also quite difficult. So we decided at that point to support even the ECD practitioners, where we gave them 700 rand vouchers so that they're able to support themselves during this time, because it also meant that they were unable to work, they were unable to earn any income during this time. So that was quite important. And I'll touch on some of the other support we gave to ECDs later. Yeah, in terms of other community support during the COVID pandemic, we felt it was also important to support the healthcare workers as well as the patients. So we found that there were patients coming into these huge COVID centers, didn't necessarily have the hygienic requirements, basic requirements like toothbrushes and toothpaste and soap and washing towels. So we're able to put together those packs and ensure the donation of that to patients, and also to recognize and support the healthcare workers. I mean, we know sort of stress and hard work and that they were focused with or they were faced with. And even now, we continue to support them in that regard. When the ECDs finally were open and we're starting to open, we also supported them with the necessary personal protective equipment to ensure that they were compliant with the COVID-19 regulations in terms of things like sanitizers, like masks, washing facilities, so that they could operate and begin to operate. During that time, there was also the feeding, which was also interrupted. But through our partners, the Lunchbox Fund, we were able to continue doing the feeding through the ECDs into the households that the children came from. We also provided the ECDs with additional COVID-related training so that they could continue and apply their learning and their training. Through our till points, our customers donated just over 1.4 million rands through to the Act for Change Fund, and specifically to the Solidarity Fund. And the group itself donated in excess of 2 million rands to the Solidarity Fund. Finally, there was a campaign that we did through one of our companies, Mediarite, one of our brands, to encourage hand washing on World Hygiene Day. So this brings me to the end of my short presentation. It's really an overview of how the group was supporting its communities during COVID and during the pandemic. Some of the support still continues. These are the programs that we still continue even now, because we believe that as a group, we are not operating in the communities that we trade in, but actually we are part of the communities that we trade in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev. Wow, wow, wow. Act for change. And we see from the values of the organization and its strong call to action, all the philanthropic good that came from concerted efforts to alleviate the stresses that communities felt during COVID-19 lockdowns, and huge appreciation to all the frontline workers who stayed out there and kept the smile on their faces underneath their masks, ensuring that everybody could get what they needed. Thank you very much for sharing the wide range of corporate good that ShopRite is responsible for. And we really are encouraged that your eye is on ECD, because our ECD centers, as you know, will be coming under the wing of the Department of Basic Education, and will become an increasing portfolio for the nutrition directorate in our branch. So thank you very much. Please stay with us. We will be attending to questions in a little bit, and it would be wonderful if you and Corinne could join us. Colleagues are out in the audience, 376 of you. Please post your questions in the chat and continue to chat amongst yourselves. We really appreciate your questions, and we will certainly be giving time to them once we've heard from Pons. So Pons is our next speaker, Pons Seklobo. She's the technical lead for National School Hygiene Programs at Unilever South Africa. And we know Pons is an energetic woman who really gets a lot of satisfaction from her job by ensuring that good hygiene and sanitation is alive and well in schools. And particularly, she's well known for the implementation of the very respected WASH program that supports hygiene for learners and for their households. So over to you, Pons. Today you're going to be sharing with us some of the experiences of running this innovative program and how it was able to continue running during COVID-19, and how the importance of hand washing probably worldwide has received the greatest exposure and reinforcement. So thumbs up for hand washing, and over to Pons. Thanks. So put me back on and let me give placement. So we're having a technical difficulty with Pons in terms of accessing the platform. We'll give her a few minutes and hope that she finds her way back in, because we're really looking forward to hearing her presentation. Thanks, colleagues. A little bit of patience while we find Pons in cyberspace. while we're waiting for Pons to reconnect, I'd like to visit our polls. Just before tea break, we asked our audience which elements should the DBE focus on to make an even greater strides in the achievements of care and support for teaching and learning goals. And it was I think everybody's voted, and this vote has changed from last time I looked at it. But I see that the overwhelming majority are saying with 64% strengthen multi-sectoral partnerships, that together we can do so much more, and join the Act for Change call that we saw in the presentation from ShopRite. And then at 36% is a call for us to increase the capacity building that is needed in the department to address challenges. So thank you very much to the 36% who recognize the challenges in the public service to reach the needs of our population. And I believe that it's by working together with private sector, the NGO community, our school communities, and all of our officials that work at district, provincial and national level, that we will be able to ensure that care and support really is the bedrock of well-being in our schools. Pons has come online. I can see her muted at the moment. We hope that Pons will unmute and that we can welcome her to the platform. Is Pons with us, tech team? Pons, please unmute. Pons, can we also ask you to allow us to see your camera so that you can go live on screen? Wonderful. The opening slide is on screen with us, and welcome to the platform, Pons. I'm so happy we found you. For a moment there, I was worried that you were lost in cyberspace, but everything lost in cyberspace is found again. I've introduced you to our wonderful audience today and would like to now give you the floor to take us through the National School Hygiene and Sanitation Program and how with Unilever you breathe life and support into this area of work. Over to you, Pons.
Thank you, Dr. Gwason. Colleagues, DG CSTL participants, good morning. I am happy to be joining the panel of presenters today to share with you the work that Unilever has been doing with the Department of Basic Education through the National Schools Hygiene and Sanitation Program. I will start off my presentation with what we had planned and how we had to adjust and change our plans in order to meet COVID challenges. Recognizing the power of collaboration, in 2017, Unilever and the Department of Basic Education announced a 5-year partnership by signing a memorandum of understanding to provide hygiene and sanitation education to every grade 1 learner in all primary schools. This initiative was a response to the need for improved hygiene and sanitation in schools in order to prevent learners from falling ill and missing out on vulnerable school days. As you may know, water, sanitation, hygiene services are an essential part of preventing and protecting human health during infectious disease outbreak, including COVID-19 pandemic. The National Schools Hygiene Program is currently being implemented in class by educators during the life skills subject area through a proven behavior change model. The program has educated over 4 million learners in the last 4 years and is on track to reach about 5 million learners during the year 5. To make learning more fun and impactful, Unilever has been providing products and books through its brands Lifebuoy, Mentor NP, and Domestos. These products are provided and are supplied to all learners in all primary schools. This is to enable the learners to practice new habits in school and also at home. Lifebuoy is an old brand that we are familiar with. It was created in 1894 as a germ-fighting soap to tackle cholera epidemic in the Victorian London. Since then, the brand has always focused on the benefits it can bring to the society with the desire to improve health and well-being of people who use it. With Lifebuoy soap being provided to schools, learners are able to wash their hands at critical times using water and soap to prevent the spread of diseases. In addition, children with dental problems have difficulties in sleeping and in playing, eating and performing their academic activities. These are some of the challenges they face due to missing discolored or damaged teeth. Generally, these oral health issues affect children's growth, self-esteem, their social development skills. The good news is, though, most of these conditions are largely preventable and can be treated in their early stages by maintaining good oral health and managing risk factors. In schools, this is achieved by providing toothbrushes and Mentadent P toothpaste to all grade 1 learners. As learners are taught on proper hygiene and sanitation practices, domestos is being provided to all primary schools to enable general workers to carry out their duties of cleaning toilets effectively. We are aware that the global community recognize certain days in order to elevate a message that is important. For example, schools participate with the global community during the Global Hand Wash Day, which is recognized on the 15th of October throughout the world. During this time, the schools participate by doing activities that are geared towards promoting the message on proper hand washing and also using soap and water to get rid of germs. We are also encouraging learners and schools to participate during the World Oral Health Day, which is the 20th of March, and National Oral Health Month in September. We normally do this with the Department of Health to bring on the services to schools and also to elevate the oral hygiene aspect with learners. In 19th of November, it's World Toilet Day. It's when, as the community, we recognize the need for proper sanitation, including proper infrastructure. I will play with you a short video just to share with you how the program is implemented in schools. I don't seem to be winning with the video, but it will be part of the presentation. You can access it later. Now, with the COVID-19, we had to change the plans and respond accordingly. The program was meant to target all grade 1 learners, reaching more than 5 million learners. More than 45,000 teachers were trained in all 15,000 schools. This was implemented in 8 provinces. And with the COVID-19, we had to also change this plan and look at other avenues of reaching out to all learners, not mainly grade 1 learners. In the past, we have been supplying Lifebuoy bar soap to grade 1 learners. This was changed to a Lifebuoy liquid soap. It meant that the soap lasts longer, and it meant that it will cover a lot of learners. There was an additional soap that was provided for all school learners, just to encourage learners to wash their hands with soap. In terms of the educational material, the material that was used by grade 1 learners was revised in order to cater for COVID-19 information. There were also posters on how to wash your hands, on when to wash your hands, how you should be washing your hands. This was also not for only grade 1 learners. The target now was for all learners from grade R until grade 12. With toilet hygiene, the posters were also made available. For example, the posters that were targeting the cleaners on frequenting on the areas that are hotspots for germs, like your doorknobs, like your desk, and also with the COVID-19 in the previous years, we've been focusing on teaching the cleaners on face-to-face training on how to do the cleaning of toilets, how to manage the toilets. With the COVID-19, that had to change, and it moved from the face-to-face training to digital training. There was also extension of the hand wash material to fit all all learners, as I mentioned earlier. This meant that for senior phase learners, the material needs to be led by learners, not by educators. Also, with the partnership that we have as Unilever, the Department of Basic Education, and also with the Department of Health, the mobile hand wash stations were made available to be used in schools whenever there's the Department of Health wanted to do an activation in schools. I'm going to play with you a very short clip that was shared on WhatsApp on how to wash hands. That didn't go very well, but the as I mentioned earlier, this is available and will be shared with everyone. You can look at it later on. Also, to increase the awareness on hand washing, during the 2020 Global Hand Wash, the global community was involved in the H is for hand. H is no longer representing head, but it is for hand washing. When learners are learning alphabets in the class, it's no longer for head, it's for hand washing, which is one way of instilling the message of us washing hands at critical times. The Global Hand Wash Day was a significant day for us, as it was as the declaration of intent was signed by various partners: Unilever, Department of Basic Education, UNICEF, African Publishers Association, Publishers Association of South Africa. We all agreed that we need to emphasize and to amplify the message on teaching our learners and our kids that H no longer represents head, but it represents hand washing. Post the Global Hand Wash Day, Unilever and UNICEF, they also had their own drive of the H is for hand washing campaign, whereby permanent hand wash stations were built in more than 30 schools. These hand wash stations were branded with the H is for hand washing. Also, Lifebuoy partnered with some retailers and also to bring the campaign into practice, putting this message in their retailers. Globally, Lifebuoy partnered with Takalani Sesame to give the message out on how H now is representing hand washing. It's no longer H is for head. Before I conclude, I would like to share with you the work that Domestos has been busy doing with the Department of Basic Education. As I mentioned earlier, pre-COVID, the Domestos team were training general cleaners around schools on how to maintain the toilets clean and also how to manage the toilets. With COVID-19, we had to change this and provide digitalized training. It meant that there were a lot of cleaners that were reached through this model, and that the DBE also were able to use this material to reach out to other schools that were not initially targeted by Domestos. Also, there was provision of material just to emphasize on areas that needed more attention. There was also additional Domestos was made available to all schools. As I conclude, by teaching learners proper hygiene habits, we have increased their potential for health and wellness and given them the greater access to education. If we teach our children at an early stage, it will not be necessary to teach adults. I thank you.
For a very informative presentation that shows us all the work that the different products inside the Unilever stable are doing to improve the lives of children. And the contribution is acknowledged, and we are very pleased with all the different ways in which you are serving communities. And thank you also, partners, for staying cool and calm, because technology was not on our side, but we were on your side, and you did a great job holding the space. And next time it'll get better, but I think today we had an instance of SlowNet, when the internet connectivity is too slow for video to run. And we just thank you very much for bringing those resources to the session, and we'll definitely look out for them online and try to view them after this engagement today. So thank you very much, Pons. I'm going to ask you now. Oh, thanks. So I'm going to ask you now to join Corinne and Sanjeev. We have some questions on the floor, and the colleagues would really like to hear the responses. I see that there's a question directly for Corinne. I'll read it in order to allow Corinne a little bit of time to prepare a response. The question reads, "Thank you for your presentation. I would like to know if this National School Nutrition Program meal can be served at 12 o'clock, because some of the learners bring sandwiches to eat at 10 o'clock. A specific question there from Upasana Singh. Over to you, Corinne.
That is a good question. In our program, we normally target whole school, and we have to ensure that the learners eat as soon as possible to participate and concentrate during the day. So when in some of our provinces, like in Gauteng and Western Cape, we serve optional breakfast, and then we shift the lunch meal a bit later. But because in most of our areas, the learners do not bring lunch boxes, so we focus the lunch meal quite early.
Thank you, Corinne, for that response. And Sanjeev, please would you come in? The question that has been posed to you is, can you give us some insight into the plans to strengthen the food gardens going forward into 2022? And Corinne, please feel free to respond as well. Sanjeev is with us. We invite him to reply. Corinne, do you want to give it a go?
I can say something about the National School Nutrition Program and food gardens. We support food gardens in our schools. The only thing, it's not a funded program, so we need to partner with private sector and even with agriculture that a lot of times sponsor us with seedlings, and then we implement at school level. But one of the challenges would be at school level would be a gardener to make it sustainable. So we need support from the community to address the sustainability of food gardens.
So call to parents, if you're in community, roll up your sleeves and come to school and help us keep those gardens going. Sanjeev, you've joined us. Would you like to add to this question?
Yeah, I think our experience is the following. We basically have three types of gardens that we support. The first one is a learning garden, which is generally at schools. Then we have a social garden, which is generally at social community centers. And the third one is a production garden, which is more gardens that are set up to be bigger and to support communities so that they can earn some income. The school gardens or the learning gardens that we have, there's quite a few of them across the country, and we continue to support them. Some of the challenges, though, which we saw during COVID was for people to have access to these gardens, which were on school properties. So, it has to be, let's say, supported by the headmaster as well as one or two teachers as, let's say, the champions of the garden. It's not necessarily the easiest thing, but I think these challenges can be overcome, and particularly if the communities are allowed access to the school properties, either after hours, during holidays, etc. And to respond to whether we will continue, our intention is to increase consistently the number of community food gardens we have. Our intention this year is to increase it to 160, and each year or each month at least to launch 2 additional community food gardens across the country.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev and Karina, for your responses. And I'm sure if Pons was able to stay with us, she would encourage us to make sure that anything we pick from our gardens, that we wash really well in order to make sure we get all the bugs and grit off those vegetables. Thank you very much, colleagues, for joining us this morning. And we've really enjoyed your presentations as it's spoken to the CSTL pillar on food security. We're now going to move to our rapporteurs. The rapporteurs are coming from MIT Africa, and we invite now Yvonne Tanguray and Jennifer Norrens to please share with us some of the key commitments and recommendations that we can look to taking forward from CSTL 2021, along with all our partners in civil society, business, academia, and the NGO community. So over to you. Do you want to lead, Yvonne? I'm seeing Yvonne on screen and I'm seeing Jennifer on scroll. Welcome. Over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My colleague and I will provide a brief presentation on the key issues and recommendations, as well as commitments that have come up during the past 3 days of deliberations. So I will start with day 1 and then hand over to Jen to do day 2, and then I'll finalize with day 3 deliberations. So from the 24th of November, we started off with a very inspiring opening session where we were reflecting on how the second National CST Conference comes at a very critical time where we are seeking to accelerate COVID-19 recovery, both as a nation, but also in terms of education sector recovery. And we also mentioned that since 2008, the Care for Support Teaching and Learning provides SADC member states with a framework for education sector to support the needs of OVCs, but also has gone beyond OVC support to the broader support network for learners in South Africa. So the CSTL framework, it was mentioned that its implementation in South Africa really intends to prevent and mitigate factors that negatively affect the impact of enrollment, retention, performance, and progression of vulnerable learners by addressing barriers to learning and teaching. We then heard some partner solidarity messages where the key issue was around an unanimous reflection on the impact of COVID-19 on young people's access to education and health, and on the need for greater investments on psychosocial support, and also the value of partnerships from community to private sector, to UN agencies, civil society, and with the government. We then moved on to some opening presentations that were provided by UNICEF and MIT Africa. And we noted that COVID has resulted in further learning loss. And for teachers, it has exacerbated teacher shortages, and teacher skills and teacher absenteeism were already pre-existing challenges in the education sector, but these were further exacerbated during the COVID-19. And the presentation from UNICEF, from Dr. Shiraz, really set the tone in terms of providing us with an overview of the potential that online platforms play as a supportive mechanisms for mental health and psychosocial support for children, as well as us really acknowledging the potential pitfalls and dangers for an increased online engagement with learners. We also then heard a presentation on the rapid assessment of CSTL by my colleague Jennifer. And we did note that from the rapid assessment that took place between 6 to 7 weeks over a number of schools, that many schools continue to be a safe haven of support. And there have been some concerted efforts to implement certain pillars of the CSTL in practice. But what was needed was a better investment in capacity building on SIS as well as CSTL. So we learned that interventions, as we've been noted, should be contextually relevant and should take into account how schools were affected by COVID-19, and where wealthier schools might not have really lost a lot of learning time. Some poor communities did lose time, and it's important to share resources. We also, during day one, looked at presentations from the DPE and also from NECT, and we saw that there was a strong correlation between socio-economic factors and the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, where we noted that poor communities were more badly affected than affluent communities, and the rotational attendance of schools post school opening has emerged as a key issue to continue to ensure that learning continues. But what we've also learned is that for the next waves of COVID-19, there has been evidence that shows that there's no direct correlations between school closures and increase in infections. We do also note that in terms of rapid response to the high school dropouts, we also need to look into trends around disengagement of learners. And there was an urgent action for us to track absenteeism, have early warning systems that support us to see the hotspots on areas where we are losing learners, but also use these trackers and early warning systems to provide care and support, particularly psychosocial support, and building partnerships to ensure that learners continue to access education. So the salient issues, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, that came out from day one is that as we're talking about continuing education post-COVID-19 or during COVID-19, we really need to ensure that learning never stops through different response interventions. And also our partners were really committing in terms of ensuring that the partnerships continue to be present within government's efforts using a multi-sectoral approach. We also noted that from the chat boxes and also from the deliberations that the 10 pillars of the CSTL continue to be relevant even in situations of health emergencies. So we need to continue investments in implementation of the 10 CSTL pillars based on contextually relevant analysis of how they apply in different schools and contexts. There's also need for ongoing training and increased support systems and structures for teachers, particularly with the added acceleration of teaching and also the burden of ensuring that learners continue to be safe during the COVID-19 and the recovery. Jen, over to you for day 2.
Great, thank you, Yvonne. Greetings, everyone. So on day 2, the focus was on health, social protection, and then after the tea break, it was on psychosocial support. And in the morning, we heard from Dr. Kumbaneki from SADC Secretariat, who gave us a brief overview of the recent ESSA commitment evaluation and focused on the efforts for a recommitment to the ESSA commitment, really focusing on the needs of focusing on comprehensive sexuality education and continuing access for young people and sexual reproductive health services, and that this ESSA commitment is a real key strategy to support care and support for teaching and learning. We also heard both from Dr. Kumbaneki and from Yvonne about just how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected young people in terms of their access to sexual and reproductive health services, how it has resulted in early and unintended pregnancies and in increased gender-based and child violence, and so that these are issues that need to be addressed very urgently. The access to sexual and reproductive health services. Sorry, you can go back. Really, this is really one of the really key issues for governments to continue to consider in terms of increased investments and really looking at the referral systems and ways to strengthen both the health and education systems. And then we also heard from Colleen Wagner, who gave us a really interesting presentation on the work that NACOSA is doing on supporting pregnant young women and ensuring that these pregnant learners or learners that have recently had children are provided with the appropriate care and support services so that they are able to continue in their education and thrive. Next slide, please. And then following the tea break, we focused on psychosocial support. And if you all remember in the polling that was done, psychosocial support was really identified as a key issue that needs to be taken up as we go into the next year, as we work towards building back better. And while the focus of the discussions were on primarily on psychosocial support for learners, I think a critical area too is also just ensuring that teachers, that the whole school community has access to the necessary psychosocial support that they need in this very unsettling and traumatic time. So there were different psychosocial support models that were presented. There was discussion around mental health first aid training, having online counseling, as well as mobile units available for people to access, particularly during times of lockdown or where people are less able to be able to move around. There was also the discussion of programs that are really focused on capacitating community committees, including ward counselors and traditional and faith leaders, to take charge in addressing the mental health needs of children and families. And then also there was the presentation on the important role of school-based care and childcare workers, and as well as trained LSAs that provide critical psychosocial support to learners during these times. So schools need more support personnel, such as the child and youth care workers, as well as more structures to better address the mental health and psychosocial support needs of learners, particularly those that have been affected by COVID-19. And I would also add, of course, the mental health and psychosocial support needs of the teachers, of caregivers, and the broader community. John? Yes, and so this was just the results of the poll that had been taken, where we see that the key issues for prioritization for the coming years would be on mental health and psychosocial support, but there was also the emphasis on effective implementation of re-entry policies for pregnant girls, WASH and school infrastructure, the improvement of ICT coverage and connectivity. And in the chat box, there was also discussion among people that really almost all of the pillars are really important, and that there needs to be a recognition of the way that these are all supporting each other and intersecting to each other to support the whole child. Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Jen. Today we were really focusing on three important CSTL pillars, and we started with a presentation from the Center of Justice and Crime Prevention, where we were talking about the online safety and protection, which was situated within the United Convention on the Rights of the Child, particularly the General Comment number 25 on children and the digital space. We saw that during COVID-19, there was increased use of online and also ICTs, but this also created a double-edged sword, where we saw increased online exploitation and sexual abuse amidst the background where children were also spending increased time online. So based on the study that was presented from the United States by the National Commission on Missing and Exploited Children, it was noted that there was 97% increase of exposure to child sexual abuse material. And what we saw is that in some certain areas or countries, the increased time online had also led to high levels of depression, limited learning outcomes, although this varies where other children were coping well when they have skills to navigate the digital space. So children's experience were different, but what we saw is that there is differential access to ICTs. And what is critical is for us to invest in skills and literacy for safe navigation of the online space, but also as teachers and learners and also need to be supported to ensure that they invest in policies that provide data protection and security, and also creating the balance between providing an enabling space for using ICTs, but also not surveillance of young people as they continue to exercise their agency. So the presentation also focused on a deviation from a punitive approach to addressing online risks, but rather one that is focused on care and support and using the school as an entry point for providing such care and support. We also then heard from Agape Youth Movement, where Mr. Tetale looked into the importance of amplifying youth voices in addressing violence and also using intergenerational dialogues. There was an interesting 3-minute video that showed the importance and of having young people talk about the truth to their power and what they need to feel safe amidst a lot of social ills. So support to learners is critical, and this also means supporting them with the data costs. And as they engage within the online space, this also strengthens their skills on utilizing online platforms, but also it ensures that as they are exercising their agency, they lead their own interventions to address issues such as gender-based violence, cyberbullying, and also making healthy decisions. We also noted from the presentation that online engagement with children really informs adaptation strategies for how we engage with our learners, and to also hear from them and to have their voice at the heart when we are addressing issues that affect them both in the school setting but also in communities. Then this session then was concluded by a presentation from the Institute of Security Studies, where we were really seeing very excellent interventions that support the prevention of violence against women and children. And the analysis that was presented showed that there are some effective interventions which can focus on laws and policies, norms and values, some interventions that are focused on norms and values, and economic strengthening interventions do have some impact in terms of preventing violence against children. So from this presentation, we noted that it is important to address embedded norms and values that drive violence against children between parents. And we can also see how we can change parents' discipline to children by ensuring that we use social media, we use radios and other interventions to address some negative norms and values that affect children. So we also noted that children that are positively connected to a school have increased protection against risk-taking behavior from violence. And parent and caregiver support influences positive parenting when they are receptive to change. And the concluding slide was very powerful, as it reminded us that we need to start early when we are talking about prevention, but also have a nuanced and contextualized approach to addressing violence against children, looking at the types of interventions that have proven to work. We then moved to session 2 after tea break, and our first presentation was from Ms. Karine Muller, who provided us an analysis of the National School Feeding Program, a National School Nutrition Program, where she provided us the legal and policy framework for the NSNP. But also she mentioned that there has been a hybrid approach with certain provinces using a centralized funding approach and other provinces using a decentralized funding modality. We then also looked into the impact of COVID-19 on school feeding program, and we noted that during the first wave, when schools closed, there was no schooling led to no feeding. And through the DBE, the Department of Social Development supported the DBE in applying for disaster relief funds to provide food parcels to households. We also saw the main challenges and how the NSP was adaptive in terms of amending the grant framework, but also introducing 3 feeding modalities, as well as the use of social media to advance nutrition education and to encourage learners and parents to come and access food parcels and school meals. We then ended the day with 2 interesting presentations from Sanjeev and Pons, looking at the transformative role that private sector plays in terms of corporate social responsibility in augmenting government efforts to food security and hygiene support to vulnerable communities. And these presentations were provided by ShopRite and Unilever. So what are we learning from the deliberations of the past 3 days? We have learned that we need to ensure that learning never stops through accelerated implementation of CSTL at national level. Given the sheer percentage of the child population in South Africa that is in public schools, there is a business case, ladies and gentlemen, there is an ethical case, and there is a development case for us to continue using the CSTL for education recovery and continuity despite the challenges of COVID-19. We've also noted that from the deliberations, we need to strengthen and increase support systems at community, school and national levels, using the ecological model to ensure that we are working with communities and schools to provide care and support. Improvement of infrastructure to support school health was also noted in terms of ensuring that we have adequate hand washing facilities and wash facilities, and that the number of classrooms are increased to ensure that we meet social distancing during COVID-19 spikes. We've also noted that we need to invest in research, in evidence building, and also in monitoring school attendance and disengagement, as such research will provide us an evidence base that will inform strategies to retain learners and for us to prevent violence. What also came out strongly was that we need to analyze mega trends and risks. It's very clear that online safety and protection is becoming a huge issue that the government needs to prioritize with close collaboration with other stakeholders, and also consider ICT penetration, as well as addressing the digital divide for improved educational outcomes. We also need to provide technical guidance on keeping children safe online, as well as extending such guidance to teachers, parents. What also came out clearly during the last 3 days was that efforts should be put to address inequalities with a clear focus on supporting pregnant girls and also poorly resourced families. And then we also need to support the development and expression of learner agency and child participation in the implementation of the CSTL policies. The poll that we did also showed that the Department of Basic Education should focus on strengthened multi-sectoral partnership as part of efforts to achieving CSTL goals. So ladies and gentlemen, as South Africa joins the world in building back better for our children, the deliberations showcased that the critical success factors for CSTL are the importance of mainstreaming care and support through the entire education system, with the government leading such efforts. and that the concept of the school as an ecosystem and as a safe haven for support should continue to be championed, and that delivery of care and support should be noted as part of a critical element of a continuum of care and support. And as we do our different interventions as private sector, as government, as NGOs and the UN agencies, we need to note that we do this and the child has to be at the center, and the child needs holistic and integrated support from all angles. And we've also noted that we go far when we go together. Therefore, partnerships at all levels are important. Madam Chair, I finalize the conclusion by mentioning some key aspects that have come up. Agility, adaptation, partnership, and in political will definitely be key levels of successful implementation of the CSTL pillars from 2022 and beyond. Thank you, Chair. We submit.
Thank you very much, Jennifer and Yvonne, for a very succinct